Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a tactical mailbox for your handgun. This is the Viridian RFX 45. Now, full disclosure on the Viridian RFX 45, Viridian did send this optic out to me for free. On top of that, they've also sent me 3 or 4 other optics in total, so I've worked with them for a little while. They sent me some optics for free, so keep that in mind throughout this video. Now, getting into the basics of the RFX 45, this, as you can probably tell, is an enclosed emitter optic designed mostly for handguns, though I've used it in several different applications as well. And of course, because this is Viridian and almost everything they do is in green, the RFX 45 comes with a 5 MOA green dot, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Now, the MSRP on this optic, depending on the package that you choose, basically what mount it comes with, is somewhere between $400 and almost $500, meaning that it is a fairly expensive optic, though for the competition of closed emitter pistol optics, it's kind of in line, if not exceptionally well placed. Now, the package that I received from Viridian came with the Glock MOS adapter, the RMR adapter, the low mount, and the high mount, so you could mount it on just about anything. They also do make a doctor adapter for it as well, though that is the only one that I have not used. Now, getting into basics on the Viridian RFX 45, while it is not a large optic in the grand scheme of things, for the enclosed pistol optic genre, it is actually pretty big and chunky. It is a very tall optic with a very, very thick top bezel due to some design choices, which we'll get into a little bit later on. So there are smaller enclosed pistol optics on the market. This is going to be one of the bigger, bulkier ones. Now, even with that size, the weight comes in at 1.73 ounces. Again, that's going to change a little bit depending on what mount that you're using, but for a pistol optic, that is perfectly fine. Most guns that you're going to put them on are going to have more than enough reliability headroom where that weight shouldn't throw off the slide timing all that much. And in fact, on the gun that I'm using it here, this is a ported Glock 17 with, of course, a big window cut in the slide. So this slide, even with the RFX 45, is probably lighter than a stock Glock slide. Now, material choice on this optic is, interestingly enough, 60-61, which most optics in this genre are actually 70-75, which has about double the strength to weight ratio of 60-61, depending on the application and how it's made. However, as we'll get into durability later on, this did pass the raw durability testing very well. It did meet an AR500 steel plate several times and did not have any issues with the glass or the body. So even though it is 60-61 versus 70-75, the very small, compact, durable design of the optic body is holding it up very well, even if the material choice is a little bit suboptimal when compared to other optics on the market. Now, getting into window size, this is one of those areas where the Viridian RFX 45 does not do that great, coming in at 24/16, which is the window size of a much smaller footprint optic, and of course a very large enclosed body. That is the downside of a lot of the enclosed emitter options, is that they do have a reduced window size compared to their body, and the Viridian RFX 45 is going to be no different. Now, the window size is not unusable. It is just going to be a little bit more difficult to use. It's going to be a little bit harder to track the dot during recoil, especially depending on what gun you have it mounted to. Again, on a ported Glock 17, I can control the recoil very well. I can track the dot throughout recoil no matter how fast I'm firing it. If you're having it on a smaller gun, a snappier gun, something that's not comped or ported, you're going to have a harder time following that dot during recoil. Depending on who you are, depending on how you're using it, that may or may not be a big deal, but that is just something to be aware of, that the window size on the RFX 45 is very short, especially with that very thick top bezel, which in certain circumstances will make it a little bit more annoying to track and to follow during recoil, odd position, so on and so forth. And in general, most people probably find big windows a little bit easier to use, or at least a little bit nicer to look through, even if it doesn't necessarily have a huge negative impact on performance. Now, some of the design choices going on with the RFX 45 is what lends to having a shorter window, and that is the fact that you have a top-mounted 2032 battery. And of course, that top bezel has to be thicker because it is, of course, holding the 2032. It's also holding your windage, elevation, and your emitter all in the top of the optic, so it, of course, is going to be thicker. Now, the advantage of having it on top versus having it on the bottom is that the window is actually lower than if you stuck all of that underneath the optic, and then of course the window would have to lift up a little bit. The downside is that you have a very, very thick top bezel that is going to obstruct some of your view and to make your window size smaller overall. So there is definitely a trade-off going on there, and it's up to you whether that's going to be worth it or not for you. Now, getting into controls of the optic, you of course have windage and elevation. They do have very nice refined clicks. I believe the clicks are in 1 MOA increments, which for a handgun is perfectly fine. I believe I zeroed it at in between 15 and 25 yards, depending on what I was doing. Never had any issues with that. Now, as far as the rest of the controls go, you of course have a up arrow and a down arrow for increasing or decreasing your illumination. You have 10 settings, 8 daylight settings, and 2 night vision settings. I have not tested the night vision settings, so I can't speak to how well they work or if they work at all. Now, getting into battery life, this is again a 5 MOA green dot and a 2032 battery. They do claim up to 50,000 hours. Realistically, at a higher setting, you're probably looking somewhere between 5 and 10,000 hours, though that is also comboed with their instant on technology, which has worked perfectly. Basically, after a short amount of time of no movement or no motion detected, it will automatically turn off, and then once it senses motion, it will automatically turn it back on. So far, it has been 100% flawless. You can see it at rest be off, and then as soon as you touch the gun, it will automatically turn on. It remembers your last brightness setting. It's all good, very standard for the industry, and something that is going to help save your battery life. It's definitely going to be measured in years rather than months or weeks, and I have had this for several months at this point with no issues. It's going to be one of those things where you probably change your battery out every year, every other year, just to be on the safe side. Now, getting into the mount design and adapters on the Viridian RFX, as I mentioned earlier, mine came with the RMR adapter and the Glock MOS adapter, as well as the high and low mounts. Now, I've used the low mount as an offset dot on a rifle. I've also used the Glock MOS adapter on the Primary Arms 5X Prism with their top mounted red dot, which did look very silly, though it did work to have a optic on top of your prism. However, as you see it here, it is currently using the RMR adapter on this Aim Surplus slide. Now, fortunately, the RFX 45 is utilizing the Acro footprint, meaning that this should attach natively to any Acro cut slides or work with any aftermarket Acro adapters. Now, the way that the Acro system works is that you have an adapter plate that goes in between your optic and your slide. You screw that adapter directly into your slide. In this case, again, this is the RMR adapter, so you have RMR screws that go into the adapter that hold it to the slide. And then you have a cross bolt on the actual RFX 45 that then holds it to the adapter. Now, the fitment between the Viridian RFX plate, the slide, and the optic is all very good. There is definitely going to be some variation between slide, adapter, and optic choice, so depending on your configuration, you may have a better or worse fit. However, the Viridian plates, the adapter to the optic fit is very good. Just keep in mind that if you're using aftermarket plates, adapters, slides, so on and so forth, your fit could be better or worse, again, depending on what you're doing. Now, getting into actually using the Viridian RFX 45, it is a very nice dot to use when we talk about the dot quality, the emitter refresh rate, the glass quality, all of that. All of that is very good, and we'll get into that detail in just a minute, but it's all going to be held back a little bit just by the fact that it has a fairly diminutive window size. Now, getting into just the glass quality, the glass has almost no tint to it whatsoever, even in full daylight. It is a green emitter, so I believe they use different color notch filters, so the color looks very good. It is not blue tinted whatsoever. It looks very nice, very natural. Is there some magnification or warping? If you move it around in front of your face, you can definitely tell the image is moving and shifting a little bit. So there is a little bit of warping, though, again, not as bad as some other pistol dots that I've seen. The color is very good. The glass quality seems to be very, very high. The actual image is very pleasant. On top of that, the 5 MOA dot may sound like a big dot if you're used to like a 2 MOA red dot or something like that. However, Viridian's dot looks very, very good. Now, I don't have any astigmatism in my right eye. In my left eye, I actually do have a little bit of an astigmatism, but in my right eye, It looks very, very good, very crisp. It is a little bit larger than some of the other 2MOA dots on the market, but as you'll probably see in some of the footage, the dot quality, the crispness, clarity, roundness, it looks very, very good, even for a 5MOA dot. Some other 2MOA dots, they might be a little bit oblong or just might not look quite right. This one here is a little bit bigger, but it looks very good on top of the good glass quality, on top of the emitter refresh rate being basically perfect. It looks like a very constant laser beam regardless of illumination setting, so the refresh rate isn't tied to illumination brightness, which is a very nice thing to see. Again, the only thing really holding it back when it comes to actual usability is just the fact that the window is a little bit smaller for a very large optic, so it is a little bit less nice to use than some other bigger windowed optics on the market. And the trade-off is going to be durability. Is this optic actually durable? That is one of the two advantages of an enclosed emitter pistol optic. One is that it should of course be much more durable, and they are in general much more durable than an open emitter pistol dot. And of course, just by virtue of being closed, there's nothing that can actually get in the way of the emitter and cause your dot to go down, rain, snow, dandruff, whatever it may be that can block the emitter on an open emitter dot. Now, when it comes to durability, I did have one minor issue, so I set up a target at 25 yards, did a control group, a 5-round control group, rested at 25 yards, got a pretty good group for a not particularly accurate handgun. Again, this is a ported, very inexpensive ported Glock 17, so the accuracy that I'm usually getting out of it is not that good, maybe 6 inches at best at 25 yards. On this specific day, I was getting about 3 inches, 3.5, maybe 4 inches, which is pretty good at 25 yards for this, again, ported Glock 17. Now, after the first drop, which is just onto dirt and rocks, just kind of a harsh drop that's more normal, probably about the hardest drop that any gun is going to normally encounter. And unfortunately, I did not notice it at the time, but it started to have just some random flyers, and that is because the optic plate actually came loose. Now, they were definitely torqued down ahead of time, and I hadn't had any issues with them up until that point on various different setups through thousands of rounds. Hadn't had any issues up until that point, but during that first shoulder height drop, they did come loose, and I started to get some flyers. Now, I went ahead and I did the shoulder height drop onto an AR500 steel plate, and I was still getting weird flyers. At that point, that is when I noticed that the whole optic was actually moving. So then I took off the RFX 45 from the adapter. The adapter was the loose component. The RFX 45, the cross bolt on that did not come loose, only the screws on the adapter holding it to the slide. Now, I went ahead and I retorqued those down to 20 inch-pounds, which I believe is 2 inch-pounds higher than the manufacturer's recommended spec. And then, of course, because I had to remove the Viridian RFX 45 to retighten the adapter to the Aim Surplus slide, I went ahead and retorqued the cross bolt on the RFX 45 to 18 inch-pounds. At that point, I repeated the test, this time at 15 yards, just to get a little bit of tighter groupings. I wasn't sure if the flyers were from the optic or from the ported barrel. And at 15 yards, I went ahead and did a 5-round control group, looked just fine, did a shoulder height drop onto dirt and rocks. The next 5 rounds looked just fine, did another shoulder height drop onto an AR500 steel plate, so that was 2 drops on an AR500 steel plate, and again, the group looked like it hadn't shifted much at all. So as far as the durability of the optic setup goes, I think it's perfectly fine. It's definitely going to handle quite a lot of abuse. Something else you should note is that it does have a large aluminum extrusion in front of the front lens, meaning that if you ever needed to rack it off of something, you're just racking off of the 6061 body, not off of the lens, so the front lens is very nicely protected. The back lens, however, if for whatever reason you had to do something or accidentally hit it, the back lens is very close to the rear of the optic, so that is a little bit more in danger than the front because of course, the way the front is angled and it has this large aluminum overhang on it. So anytime you're doing any racking off the front of the optic, should you need to, it's going to be off the body, not off the lens. So as far as the optic itself is concerned, I do think that it is perfectly durable for just about any situation you could possibly throw at it. I think the body itself is going to be incredibly durable, just like most other small micro footprint and closed emitter optics. However, the issue with most Acro style dots is the fact that you're always or almost always going to have a adapter between your optic and your slide, meaning that that's another area where something can go wrong. You can have a fitment issue, you can have your screws come loose as I did, just another point of failure in the system. Now, the minor shift that might have occurred during my drops could definitely be to the fact that the Slide fit isn't perfect, but it is very good to the RMR adapter. Again, different slides that actually have the reinforcement posts, that have a little bit better design in the slides, more accurate barrel. The issues that I personally had could be attributed to the inexpensive barrel slide combo. So as far as the optic itself is concerned, it has all of the features you would want. It certainly has all of the durability you would want as well. The glass quality is very good. The dot looks very good. Really, the only issue with it is going to be that smaller window size and that very thick top bezel with that top mounted battery, windage, elevation emitter. All of that is housed again in that top bevel. That's really going to be the main drawback. On top of that, the price is a little higher than I would like to see. Again, anywhere from $400 to almost $500, depending on which one you're going with. That is pretty expensive. I think if you compare that with some of the other cheaper optics on the market, you might be able to snag like a HoloSun enclosed emitter optic for a little bit less than that. And HoloSuns in general are going to have the same feature sets, if not a little bit better. I do actually think the glass quality on this is better than almost all of the HoloSun dots that I've tried, so there is that. But again, the price is certainly in the ballpark, if nothing to get excited about. Now, I will mention it here at the end of the video, but I believe Viridian and Adaball make basically the exact same sight with a few minor tweaks, and I believe the Adaball is quite a bit cheaper. So again, they're probably using the same overseas OEM because these are overseas manufactured optics. So if they are actually identical in terms of performance, then just get whichever one looks better to you, I suppose. If you like green versus red, whichever one's cheaper, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I do think the Viridian RFX 45 is a good dot and certainly something that I will probably continue to use. There are a few quirks and minor issues with just the optic design in general. It's definitely not going to be my favorite just target dot, but for a extremely durable optic and something that isn't too expensive, I think that it does a good job and definitely gets you in the ballpark. So again, the performance is good, the durability is very good, it has all the features you would want, but because it's in contention with a lot of other optics in the same price category with very similar features, it's maybe not the most enthusiastic recommend. If it is something that you're interested specifically, you love the 5 MOA dot, you really like the good glass quality, it's something that can be worth looking into. But again, there are a lot of options in this space, some better, some worse, and I think that this is a good option to take a look at. So with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the Viridian RFX 45 in the comments down below. But once again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.